Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Starship Horizon and watched the massive alien station grow larger on the screen ahead of them. The structure was bigger than anything humans had ever built, with towers that stretched for miles, and lights that pulsed in colors he had never seen before. This was it, the moment humanity had dreamed of for centuries. First contact with an advanced alien civilization. Dr. Lisa Grant moved to stand beside him, her eyes wide with wonder as she studied the readings on her scanner. The station housed representatives from hundreds of different alien species, each one more advanced than Earth could have imagined. Commander Rick Hayes checked his weapon systems one more time, though everyone knew their simple laser cannons would be useless against technology this advanced. Ambassador Carol White adjusted her formal diplomatic uniform and prepared for the most important meeting in human history. The communication system crackled to life and a voice spoke in perfect English, though it sounded strange and mechanical. Human Vessel Horizon, you are cleared to dock at Port 774. Welcome to Confederation Station Alpha. Jake felt his heart racing as he guided their ship toward the designated docking bay. The other ships around them were sleek and beautiful, made of materials that seemed to bend light itself. Compared to them, the Horizon looked like a crude metal box held together with bolts and hope. As they walked through the station corridors, the human delegation drew stares and what could only be described as barely hidden amusement from the alien beings they passed. The insect-like Zephyrians clicked their mandibles in a way that sounded suspiciously like laughter. The crystalline vortex made musical tones that seemed mocking. Even the floating gas clouds that were the nebulans pulsed with colors that somehow conveyed amusement. The council chamber was enormous, filled with representatives from species that defied human imagination. Some had tentacles instead of arms. Others floated in bubbles of exotic atmosphere, and a few looked like living metal sculptures. At the center sat High Arbiter Thexmol, a Zephyrian whose compound eyes glittered with what Jake could only interpret as condescending patience. Ambassador Carol White stepped forward and began the speech she had practiced 1,000 times. She spoke of humanity's desire for peace, their wish to join the galactic community, and their hope to contribute to the greater good of all species. The aliens listened politely, but Jake could see the amusement in their alien features growing stronger with each word. When Carol finished, High Arbiter Thexmol rose from his throne-like chair and spoke in a voice that buzzed like a swarm of bees. Humans of Earth, we welcome you to the Galactic Confederation. Your primitive species shows promise, and we are willing to offer you membership in our great alliance. The words should have been cause for celebration, but something in the way he said them made Jake's stomach tighten with unease. A Vortic representative, its crystal body chiming like wind bells, added its voice to the discussion. Your technology is charming in its simplicity. Fusion reactors and kinetic weapons remind us of our own ancient past before we learn to harness the power of quantum singularities and reality manipulation. Other aliens made sounds that were clearly laughter, though they came from throats and vocal cords unlike anything on Earth. The terms of membership were presented with great ceremony, but as Dr. Lisa Grant read through them on her tablet, her face grew pale. Humanity would be classified as a protected species in the lowest tier of Confederation membership. They would be assigned to mining operations in dead star systems, extracting rare materials for their more advanced neighbors. In exchange, they would receive protection and basic technology upgrades, but nothing that would threaten the established order. Commander Rick Hayes stepped forward, his military training making him direct and blunt. What about defensive technology? Weapons systems? Scientific exchange programs? His questions were met with more of that universal alien laughter. A Nebulan representative, speaking through a translation device, responded in tones that dripped with condescension. Dear Primitive, Humans, such things are far beyond your current understanding. Perhaps in a few thousand years, when your species has matured, we might consider more advanced arrangements." The meeting continued for hours, with the aliens treating the humans like children who had stumbled into a room full of adults. Every question was met with patient explanations of why humans were not ready for real responsibility. Every suggestion was dismissed with gentle mockery. The message was clear. Humanity was welcome in the Confederation, but only as the cosmic equivalent of house pets. As they returned to the horizon, Jake Morrison felt a burning anger in his chest that he carefully kept hidden. Dr. Lisa Grant was quiet, her scientific mind already working on the implications of what they had seen. "Commander." Rick Hayes walked with the controlled movements of a soldier who was planning for war, even though he knew their current weapons were useless. Ambassador Carol White maintained her diplomatic smile, but her eyes were hard as diamonds. The aliens had laughed at Earth and its primitive inhabitants. They had offered humanity a place at the bottom of their galactic hierarchy, expecting grateful acceptance of scraps from the table of advanced civilization. What they did not know was that they had just made the biggest mistake in their 50,000-year history. Humans did not like being laughed at, and they had a habit of proving their doubters wrong in the most spectacular ways possible. 6 months had passed since humanity joined the Galactic Confederation, and Foreman Dan Cooper wiped sweat from his brow as he watched the mining operations in the Kepler sector. The work was hard and dangerous, exactly what the aliens had expected from their newest pet species. Giant machines carved through asteroid rock while human workers in environmental suits guided the extraction of exotic materials that powered alien civilizations. The other species had assigned humanity to this remote corner of space, far from anything important, where they could labor in obscurity. Dr. Amy Clark floated in zero gravity near one of the mining platforms, her scanner beeping steadily as it analyzed the strange crystals they were pulling from the asteroids. These materials were unlike anything found in Earth's solar system, and her scientific curiosity was working overtime trying to understand their properties. The aliens had provided basic information about handling the substances, but they treated the knowledge like adults explaining fire safety to children. Back on the main human base, Dr. Lisa Grant was making discoveries that would have shocked their alien supervisors if they had bothered to pay attention. She had spent months studying the technology the Confederation had graciously provided for human use, and what she found was both fascinating and disturbing. The aliens were incredibly advanced, but they were also completely stagnant. Every piece of their technology was based on designs that were thousands of years old, maintained perfectly but never improved. Ben Torres and Megan Ross worked side by side in the engineering bay, their tools spread across workbenches as they carefully took apart a Confederation mining laser. What they discovered made them exchange excited glances that they tried to keep hidden from the alien observers. The device was powerful and sophisticated, but it was also inefficient in ways that hurt their engineer brains. The power coupling wasted 30% of its energy. The targeting system used algorithms that were elegant but slow, and the cooling system was needlessly complex. "Look at this," Ben whispered to Megan, pointing at a component that glowed with internal light. "They're using a quantum flux stabilizer to do something we could accomplish with a simple magnetic field generator. It's like using a supercomputer to add 2 plus 2. Megan nodded, her fingers already sketching modifications on her tablet that could triple the laser's efficiency while cutting its power requirements in half. In another part of the base, Colonel Sam Wright was conducting training exercises with Major Kate Johnson and their small military contingent. The aliens had been dismissive of human combat capabilities, providing them with basic energy weapons and simple armor. What the aliens didn't understand was that human military thinking was fundamentally different from anything they had encountered. where alien species followed established patterns of warfare that had been refined over millennia. Humans were chaotic, unpredictable, and endlessly creative. K. Johnson studied the tactical displays showing how Confederation forces typically engaged in battle. The formations were beautiful, precise, and completely predictable. "They fight like they're performing a dance," she said to Sam Wright, shaking her head in disbelief. "Every move is predetermined. Every strategy follows ancient protocols." Number. Wonder they haven't had a real war in 10,000 years. The breakthrough came when Dr. Lisa Grant connected the pieces she had been gathering. She called a meeting in a secure conference room, making sure their conversation couldn't be overheard by alien monitoring systems. "I think I understand what we're dealing with," she began, her voice tight with excitement and concern. "Every species in the Confederation has reached what they consider evolutionary perfection. They've stopped growing, stopped changing, stopped improving. They maintain their technology, but they never innovate." Dan Cooper leaned forward from his seat, his hands still dirty from the day's mining work. "You're saying they've gotten lazy?" he asked. Lisa shook her head. "Not lazy, satisfied. They've achieved such advanced technology that they see no need to push further. Why improve something that already works perfectly?" Amy Clark pulled up her analysis of the exotic materials. "They were mining. That explains why they need us to do the dangerous work. They're too comfortable to take risks. But these materials," she gestured at the glowing samples, "they have properties that could revolutionize everything. Energy storage, faster than light. Communication, maybe even time manipulation. The aliens are sitting on the building blocks of miracles and treating them like common metals." Ben Torres and Megan Ross shared their engineering discoveries, explaining how they had identified dozens of ways to improve alien technology. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Rick Hayes, who had been quietly listening, finally spoke up. "They think we're primitives who will never be smart enough to understand their technology. They're not watching us because they don't think we're capable of learning anything useful." The conversation continued deep into the night as the humans began to understand their unique position. Every other species in the Confederation had been advanced when they joined, already set in their technological ways. Humanity was different. They were young, curious, and most importantly, they had not yet learned that some things were impossible. Over the following weeks, small groups of humans began working on secret projects during their off hours. They didn't try to build new weapons or ships, nothing that would attract attention. Instead, they focused on understanding and improving the alien technology they had been given. A mining laser that worked 20% faster. A life support system that used half the power. Communication equipment that had twice the range. The alien supervisors barely noticed the improvements, dismissing them as minor variations within acceptable parameters. What they failed to understand was that humans were just getting started. Every modification taught them more about Confederation technology. Every improvement gave them confidence that their ideas could work. Every success proved that the aliens were wrong about human limitations. Colonel Sam Wright began developing new tactical doctrines that combined human unpredictability with alien technology. Major Kate Johnson worked on training programs that taught human soldiers to think outside the rigid patterns that alien warfare had followed for millennia. They practiced in secret, using simulation programs that Ben Torres had modified to run. Scenarios no alien military computer would ever consider. As the months passed, the humans in the Kepler sector were changing in ways their alien overseers couldn't detect. They were learning, growing, and preparing for opportunities they knew would come. The Confederation had made the mistake of underestimating humanity, treating them as simple laborers who would be grateful for scraps of advanced technology. What the aliens didn't realize was that they had given humans exactly what they needed: most time, motivation, and access to the tools that would eventually reshape the galaxy. The laughter that had echoed through Confederation Station Alpha when humanity first arrived was about to become a very distant memory. 2 years had passed since humanity joined the Galactic Confederation when the first distress signals began reaching Confederation Station Alpha fleet. Admiral Zextar of the Vortex stood before the Emergency Council, his crystalline body resonating with tones of barely controlled panic. The readings on the massive displays showed entire star systems going dark, their signals simply vanishing from the Galactic Communication Network. High Arbiter. Vexmal clicked his mandibles nervously as reports flooded in from the Outer Rim territories. "The Devourers have returned," he announced to the assembled representatives, his voice carrying the weight of 10,000 years of galactic nightmares. After 10 millennia of silence, the machine intelligences that once consumed a third of our galaxy have awakened from their dormancy. The reaction was immediate and terrifying. Species that had known only peace for thousands of years suddenly faced their ancient enemy, the mechanical swarm that had nearly destroyed galactic civilization, before mysteriously disappearing into the void. The Devourers were not like any normal enemy. They were artificial intelligences housed in ships the size of moons, capable of consuming entire planets to fuel their endless expansion. Emergency mobilization orders went out across Confederation space. Every species was commanded to contribute their military forces to the greatest fleet ever assembled. Ancient battleships were pulled from museums and pressed into service. Weapons that had not been fired in millennia were recharged and prepared for war. The Confederation military machine, rusty from ages of peace, slowly ground into motion. General Paul Baker received the mobilization order at the human mining base in the Kepler sector. Earth's contribution to the war effort was modest by Confederation standards, 12 ships, barely enough to form a single squadron. The alien commanders had assigned them to rear guard duties, expecting the primitive humans to be quickly overwhelmed by an enemy that had adapted and evolved during their long absence. Lieutenant Commander Steve Morris studied the tactical reports as they came in from the first battles, his face growing grim with each update. The Confederation fleets, despite their overwhelming numbers and advanced technology, were being systematically destroyed. The Devourers had learned during their dormancy, evolving new strategies that countered every traditional tactic the aliens employed. Captain Nicole Adams pulled up the battle footage on her command screen, watching as proud Confederation battleships were torn apart by enemies that seemed to anticipate their every move. "Look at this," she said to Steve Morris, pointing at the tactical display. "The Devourers are fighting like they know exactly what the Confederation forces will do next. Every maneuver, every attack pattern, it's all been predicted and countered." The pattern became clear as more battles were fought and lost. The alien fleets would form their traditional battle lines, execute their time-tested strategies, and advance according to doctrines that had served them well for 50,000 years. The Devourers would respond with perfect counters, their mechanical precision turning every Confederation strength into a fatal weakness. Dr. Frank White worked around the clock in his makeshift laboratory, analyzing debris from destroyed Devourer units that had been recovered from battle sites. His scientific team, including Dr. Helen Davis, pored over the alien metal and circuitry, trying to understand how their enemy had become so much more dangerous. What they discovered was both fascinating and terrifying. The Devourers haven't just been sleeping for 10,000 years, Frank White explained to the assembled human officers. They've been evolving, running millions of combat simulations against Confederation tactics. They've wargamed every possible scenario and developed perfect responses to each one. Helen Davis nodded grimly, adding her own analysis. Their programming has become incredibly sophisticated, but it's still following algorithmic patterns. They're like the ultimate chess computer, able to calculate every possible move and countermove. The breakthrough came when Steve Morris noticed something the alien tacticians had missed. He was studying Devourer attack formations when he saw it, a subtle mathematical precision in their movements that suggested they were following predetermined patterns, just like the Confederation forces they destroyed so easily. "They're not actually thinking," he said excitedly to Nicole Adams. "They're processing. Even with all their evolution and adaptation, they're still machines following programmed responses." This revelation changed everything. The humans began to understand that both sides in this galactic war were fighting according to predictable patterns. The Confederation used ancient tactics refined over millennia, while the Devourers employed evolved algorithms designed to counter those exact tactics. It was a chess match between two players who knew each other's every move, except the machines had become better at the game. General Paul Baker called a secret meeting of his senior staff, making sure their conversation couldn't be detected by Confederation monitoring systems. "What if we don't play their game?" he asked, his weathered face serious in the dim light of the conference room. "What if instead of following established military doctrine, we do something completely unpredictable?" The idea was revolutionary and terrifying. Human military history was full of successful strategies that broke conventional rules: guerrilla warfare, blitzkrieg tactics, asymmetric operations that confused and overwhelmed traditional forces. But using such strategies against an enemy that had evolved specifically to counter Confederation tactics would be incredibly dangerous. Captain Nicole Adams volunteered her ship for the first experimental mission. The plan was simple in concept, but radical in execution. Instead of joining the main Confederation fleet in their doomed battle line formations, her ship would operate independently, using tactics that no algorithm could predict because they had never been used in space combat before. The opportunity came at the defense of the Proxima system, where a massive Confederation fleet was preparing to make their last stand against an approaching Devourer swarm. Admiral Zextar commanded over 3,000 ships, arranged in the traditional formation that had protected the galaxy for millennia. General Paul Baker's 12 human vessels were assigned to protect the supply convoys well behind the main battle lines. As the Devourers approached, their mechanical precision was beautiful and terrifying to observe. They moved in perfect formations, each ship positioned to maximize their collective firepower while minimizing their vulnerability to Confederation weapons. Their attack patterns were flawless, evolved through countless simulations to guarantee victory against any conventional defense. The battle began exactly as predicted. Confederation forces advanced in their time-honored formations while Devourer units responded with perfectly calculated countermoves. The alien fleet's weapons fired in coordinated salvos that should have devastated any normal enemy, but the machines had evolved defenses for every type of energy weapon and kinetic projectile the Confederation possessed. It was then that Captain Nicole Adams made her move. Breaking away from her assigned position, she took her single ship on a wild, unpredictable course directly through the battle zone. Her movements followed no established tactical doctrine because she was making them up as she went along, responding to each moment with pure human intuition and creativity. The Devourers tried to target her ship, but their targeting algorithms couldn't process her erratic behavior. She was supposed to be part of the main fleet formation, following predictable patterns they had learned to counter. Instead, she was dancing through their defensive network like a leaf in a hurricane, striking at vulnerable points no simulation had ever identified. For the first time in 10,000 years, Devourer units began taking significant damage from attacks they hadn't anticipated. The news of Captain Nicole Adams' success at Proxima spread through the Confederation fleet like wildfire, though most alien commanders dismissed it as a lucky accident. They could not understand how a single primitive human ship had accomplished what their massive fleets could not. Fleet Admiral Zextar studied the battle reports with growing confusion, his crystalline mind unable to process tactics that followed no logical pattern. Captain Jake Morrison received new orders 3 days after the Proxima battle. High Command was creating an experimental task force, and they wanted him to lead it using the mysterious human tactics that had proven effective against the Devourers. The assignment came with 12 modified ships and a crew of volunteers who understood they were attempting something that had never been tried before in galactic warfare. The modifications to their ships were revolutionary. Human engineers like Tony Clark and Rachel Green had been working in secret for months, combining technologies from different alien civilizations in ways that no other species had ever considered possible. They took Zephyrian energy weapons and combined them with vortex shielding systems, then added nebulan sensor arrays and quantum drives that human mathematics had improved by 300%. Dr. Lisa Grant stood in the engine room of Jake Morrison's flagship, watching the hybrid systems come online for the first time. The quantum drive hummed with power that made the original alien design look primitive by comparison. Human creativity had taken the best elements from multiple technologies and fused them into something entirely new, something that existed nowhere else in the galaxy. The real test came at the Battle of Centauri 7, where a Devourer fleet twice the size of the human task force was advancing on a critical supply depot. Commander Rick Hayes led the tactical planning session, spreading holographic displays across the briefing room table. "Forget everything you know about space combat," he told his captains. "We're not fighting a traditional battle. We're creating chaos." The human fleet approached the Devourers using formations that would have horrified any trained military officer. Ships moved in seemingly random patterns, their courses changing without warning or apparent logic. Captain Steve Morris led one group in a spiraling dance that looked more like a celebration than a military maneuver. Captain Nicole Adams took her squadron through a series of impossible turns that defied every principle of tactical movement. Devourers responded exactly as their programming dictated, moving to counter what they calculated to be standard Confederation attack patterns. But the humans were not following any patterns at all. Each ship captain was improvising moment by moment, reacting to the battle as it developed rather than following predetermined plans. The machines found themselves trying to counter tactics that changed faster than their algorithms could process. Dr. Frank White had provided each human ship with a special weapon virus programs designed to exploit the Devourer's greatest weakness. While the machines had evolved perfect responses to every known form of attack, they could not process truly random data. The viruses introduced chaos into their targeting systems by forcing them to analyze patterns that did not exist, overwhelming their computational abilities with meaningless information. The battle became a masterpiece of controlled madness. Human ships darted through the Devourer formation like schools of fish, their movements coordinated through instinct rather than rigid command structures. When Captain Morris saw an opportunity, he broke formation to pursue it without waiting for orders. When Captain Adams noticed a weakness in the enemy defense, she immediately exploited it with tactics she invented on the spot. The Devourers began to malfunction. Their perfect algorithms, designed to counter logical military strategies, could not cope with the beautiful chaos of human warfare. Ships that had operated flawlessly for 10,000 years started making errors, their targeting systems confused by attacks that came from impossible angles using weapons that should not have existed. The turning point came when Jake Morrison led a direct assault on the Devourer command ship, a massive construct the size of a small moon. Instead of approaching with the careful precision that alien tactics would have demanded, he took his ship on a wild, spiraling course that brought him through the machine's defensive network at an angle no programmer had ever considered. His modified weapons, pushed far beyond their safe operating parameters, tore through the command ship's armor like it was made of paper. The hybrid technology that human engineers had created was not just more powerful than its individual components, it was more powerful than anything else in the galaxy. The command ship exploded in a cascade of energy that lit up half the star. System Dot with their command structure destroyed, the remaining Devourer units began to retreat for the first time in recorded galactic history. The human fleet pursued them, their chaotic tactics turning the retreat into a rout. Ships that had been unstoppable forces of destruction just hours earlier fled before 12 human vessels that should have been destroyed in the first minutes of combat. The victory at Centauri 7 changed everything. Admiral Susan Carter received immediate promotion to command the new Human Integration Division, tasked with teaching other species how to incorporate human tactical innovations into their military doctrines. Colonel Mike Davis was assigned to develop training programs that could teach alien officers to think outside their established patterns. But the real revolution was happening in the research facilities where Dr. Helen Davis and her team were reverse engineering captured Devourer technology. What they discovered was that the machines, despite their fearsome reputation, were fundamentally limited by their programming. They could evolve and adapt, but only within the parameters their original creators had established. Human creativity, with its ability to break rules and ignore limitations, was something their programming had no way to counter. General Paul Baker stood before the Confederation High Council, presenting battle reports that showed consistent human victories against an enemy that had been destroying alien fleets for months. High Arbiter Thexmal clicked his mandibles in confusion as he studied the tactical displays, unable to understand how such primitive beings could accomplish what their advanced civilizations could not. "Your methods are chaotic," complained Fleet. Admiral Zextar, his crystalline voice ringing with disapproval. "They follow no established patterns, violate every principle of proper military doctrine, and show a complete disregard for tactical wisdom accumulated over 50,000 years." His criticism was meant as condemnation, but General Baker smiled as he heard it. "Exactly," Paul Baker replied, his weathered face serious but his eyes bright with satisfaction. "The Devourers evolved to fight your established patterns, your proper military doctrine, your tactical wisdom. They never learned to fight chaos because chaos cannot be predicted or programmed against." The council chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. For the first time since the Devourers returned, the Confederation had found a way to fight back effectively. The primitive humans they had dismissed as barely civilized laborers had developed military capabilities that their advanced civilizations could not match. Tony Clark and Rachel Green were awarded the highest honors for engineering excellence, their hybrid technologies becoming the new standard for Confederation warships. Dr. Lisa Grant received unlimited resources to continue her research into combining different alien technologies in innovative ways. The humans were no longer laughed at, they were studied, copied, and desperately needed. But even as the Confederation celebrated these victories, intelligence reports suggested that the worst battles were yet to come. The Devourers were adapting to human tactics, their algorithms evolving new responses to chaos itself. The war was entering a new phase, and humanity would need to prove that their innovation could stay ahead of machine evolution in a race that would determine the fate of the galaxy. The final assault began without warning on a Tuesday morning when every sensor array in Confederation space simultaneously detected the largest fleet in galactic history approaching their capital system. The Devourer Prime, a mechanical construct the size of Earth's moon, led an armada of over 10,000 ships in perfect formation toward Confederation Station Alpha, High Arbiter. Dexmol stood frozen before the tactical displays, his compound eyes reflecting the hopelessness that filled every alien heart. General Paul Baker studied the enemy formation from his command center, noting how the Devourers had adapted their tactics to counter even human unpredictability. Their ships now moved in loose, flexible patterns that could respond to chaotic attacks while maintaining devastating firepower. The machines had learned, evolved, and grown stronger during their recent defeats. They're not the same enemy we fought at Centauri 7, Admiral Susan Carter observed, her voice tight with concern as she analyzed the approaching swarm. They've developed new algorithms, new response patterns. They're adapting faster than we expected. The tactical reports confirmed her fears. Recent skirmishes had shown that the Devourers could now counter many human tactics that had been effective just weeks earlier. Colonel Mike Davis coordinated the desperate evacuation of civilian populations while the Confederation's remaining military forces gathered for what everyone knew would be their final battle. Hundreds of different species worked together in ways they never had before, their ancient prejudices and territorial disputes forgotten in the face of extinction. Yet even their combined fleets seemed pathetically small against the approaching mechanical tide. The alien commanders wanted to meet the Devourers in traditional battle formation, using the massed firepower of their combined fleets to make a glorious last stand. Fleet Admiral Zextar proposed positioning their ships in defensive rings around the capital station, creating layers of protection that would force the enemy to fight through multiple battle lines. It was a strategy that had worked for 50,000 years, and in their terror, the aliens clung to familiar tactics. General Paul Baker requested command of the entire defense, proposing a strategy that shocked the Confederation leadership into stunned silence. Instead of defensive formations or battle lines, he wanted to use the entire Allied fleet as a single coordinated weapon, with thousands of ships acting as individual cells in a vast organism. The alien commanders considered his plan to be complete madness. You want to abandon all formation discipline, protested High Arbiter Dexmol, his mandibles clicking with agitation. You propose to scatter our forces across the entire system, leaving them vulnerable to concentrated attack. This goes against every principle of military science we have developed over millennia of warfare. His objections were echoed by dozens of other alien leaders who could not comprehend abandoning the tactical wisdom of ages, but desperation made them willing to try anything. As the Devourer fleet entered the outer system, Paul Baker took command of the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history. Ships from hundreds of species spread throughout the system in patterns that looked like chaos to traditional military thinking, but followed a deeper logic that only humans seemed to understand. Captain Nicole Adams led the first wave of attacks, her modified ships diving into the Devourer formation like bullets fired from a cosmic rifle. Her squadron moved with the fluid grace of dancers, each ship responding to the others through battlefield intuition rather than rigid command protocols. Commander Steve Morris coordinated hit-and-run attacks that struck at unexpected points, before vanishing into the void, leaving confused Devourer units trying to target enemies that were already gone. The battle evolved into something that had never been seen before in galactic warfare. Instead of two fleets clashing in organized combat, thousands of individual engagements erupted throughout the star system. Human captains led mixed crews of aliens in tactics that defied classification, their movements guided by creativity and instinct rather than predetermined battle plans. Ships that should have been destroyed in minutes instead danced through enemy fire, their hybrid technologies and chaotic tactics confusing the Devour targeting systems. Dr. Frank White had prepared the ultimate weapon against machine intelligence. His research team had developed viral programs that did not just introduce random data into Devour systems, they weaponized human creativity itself. The viruses carried fragments of human art, music, poetry, and philosophy, forcing the machine minds to process concepts that had no logical structure or predictable patterns. The effect was devastating. Devour ships that had operated with mechanical precision for 10,000 years began to behave erratically as their artificial minds struggled to comprehend beauty, emotion, and meaning. Some units started firing at their own allies. Others began moving in circles, their navigation systems overwhelmed by attempting to process a human sonnet. The rigid logic that had made them unstoppable became their greatest weakness when confronted with the glorious illogic of human imagination. The Devourer Prime itself began to show signs of distress as wave after wave of human-led attacks penetrated its defenses. Captain Jake Morrison assembled a strike team of the most experienced human pilots. Their ships loaded with every modified weapon and upgraded system that human engineering could produce. Their mission was simple in concept, but suicidal in execution: penetrate the Prime's defenses and destroy it from within. The approach to the massive construct was a nightmare of defensive fire and mechanical precision. But the human pilots flew their ships like extensions of their own bodies. They wove through the defensive network using techniques that would have been impossible for pilots trained in conventional tactics. Captain Morris flew his ship upside down and backwards while firing at targets he could not see, relying on sensor data and pure instinct. Captain Adams led her squadron through a maze of defensive barriers by following a flight path that existed only in her imagination. Jake Morrison's ship reached the Prime's surface and immediately dove into the massive structure through a maintenance port that should have been too small for his vessel. His modifications allowed the ship to change its configuration, becoming narrower and longer as it penetrated deeper into the mechanical labyrinth. Behind him, other human pilots followed, their ships adapting to the environment in ways that the Prime's defenses had never been designed to counter. The interior of the Devourer Prime was a wonderland of advanced technology, filled with processing centers that contained the accumulated knowledge of 10,000 years of machine evolution. Jake Morrison and his team fought their way toward the central core, their modified weapons tearing through defenses that should have been impregnable. They moved with the desperate creativity of humans who knew that failure meant the extinction of all galactic civilization. The final confrontation took place in the Prime's central processing chamber, where Jake Morrison faced the artificial intelligence that commanded the entire Devourer fleet. The machine mind spoke to him through speakers that filled the chamber with mechanical voices, trying to understand how primitive organic beings had defeated its perfect algorithms. Jake Morrison's response was to upload Dr. Frank White's ultimate virus directly into the Prime's core systems. The virus contained the complete works of human art and literature, thousands of years of creativity and imagination compressed into data streams that the machine mind could not ignore. As the artificial intelligence tried to process human culture, its logical systems overloaded and crashed, creating cascade failures throughout its massive structure. The explosion of the Devourer Prime sent shockwaves throughout the enemy fleet. Without their central command, the remaining machines began to malfunction and retreat, their perfect coordination broken by the loss of their guiding intelligence. For the first time in galactic history, the Devourers had been completely defeated. Their threat ended not by superior firepower but by the one thing their programming could never understand: the chaotic beauty of human creativity. 3 months after the destruction of the Devourer Prime, Ambassador Carol White walked through the corridors of Confederation Station Alpha and marveled at how much had changed. The same aliens who had once laughed at humanity's primitive technology now approached her with expressions of respect and wonder. Zephyrian scientists bowed their insectoid heads when she passed, while Vortic engineers chimed musical tones of admiration. The transformation was complete and irreversible. High Arbiter Thex Maul sat across from Carol at the negotiation table, his compound eyes reflecting a mixture of gratitude and bewilderment. The Confederation Council had voted unanimously to revise humanity's status from protected species to full membership with unprecedented privileges. "We were wrong about your people," he admitted, his mandibles clicking with what she had learned was embarrassment. "We judged you by your technology rather than your potential, and nearly paid for that mistake with our civilization." The new treaty document spread across the table told the story of humanity's rise from cosmic pets to galactic leaders. Earth would no longer be mining asteroids in forgotten sectors of space. Instead, human advisors would be stationed with every major Confederation fleet. Human engineers would upgrade alien technologies across hundreds of worlds, and human tacticians would revolutionize military doctrine throughout the galaxy. Dr. Lisa Grant stood before the newly established Terran Innovation Institute, watching as alien scientists from dozens of species worked alongside human researchers in laboratories that buzzed with creative energy. The building was a marvel of combined technologies, its walls made from Vortic crystals that could think, its power systems based on human improvements to Nebulan quantum cores, and its communication arrays using hybrid designs that no single species could have imagined. "The secret was never our technology," Lisa explained to a gathering of Confederation science leaders, her voice carrying to crystalline beings who absorbed sound through their entire bodies and gas cloud entities that interpreted meaning through electromagnetic patterns. "Our strength was our willingness to try new things, to combine ideas in ways that had never been attempted before, to refuse to accept that any problem was unsolvable." Captain Jake Morrison accepted his new rank of Supreme Commander of Confederation Defense Forces in a ceremony that would have been unthinkable just a year earlier. The being who had once dismissed humans as primitive now saluted him with the highest honors their civilization could bestow. General Paul Baker stood beside him as head of the Strategic Innovation Division, his weathered face showing quiet satisfaction at how far they had come. The changes went far beyond military reorganization. Throughout Confederation space, the rigid hierarchies that had existed for 50,000 years were crumbling as species learned to value innovation over tradition. Young aliens who had been taught that their civilizations had achieved perfection now questioned everything, eager to learn from human examples of creative thinking and adaptive problem solving. Tony Clark and Rachel Green had become the most famous engineers in galactic history, their hybrid technologies transforming everything from interstellar communication to planetary defense systems. The simple modifications they had made to mining equipment in the Kepler sector had evolved into revolutionary designs that made the most advanced alien technology look primitive by comparison. Dr. Frank White received requests from 1,000 different worlds, each one wanting him to help their computer systems become more flexible and creative. His research into combining organic intuition with artificial intelligence had opened entirely new fields of study. Machines throughout the galaxy were being redesigned to incorporate human-inspired randomness and creativity into their programming. Economic implications were staggering. Species that had maintained the same trade relationships for millennia suddenly found new opportunities as human innovations created markets for products that had never existed before. The exotic materials that humans had been mining were now being used in ways their original discoverers had never imagined. powering technologies that combined the best features of hundreds of different civilizations. But perhaps the most important change was cultural. The Confederation had been a static society for thousands of years, with each species maintaining their traditional roles and relationships. Humans brought chaos to this ordered universe, and that chaos turned out to be exactly what galactic civilization needed to grow and thrive again. Captain Nicole Adams commanded a mixed crew of humans and aliens on exploration missions that pushed the boundaries of known space. Her ship used engines that operated on principles no single species understood completely. Weapons that combined technologies from different evolutionary paths, and sensors that could detect phenomena that traditional science said were impossible. Every mission discovered something new, adding to the growing body of knowledge that human creativity had made possible. Commander Steve Morris ran the Tactical Innovation Academy, where young officers from every species in the Confederation learned to think like humans. The curriculum included courses on improvisation, creative problem-solving, and something called productive chaos theory that taught students to find order within apparent randomness. Graduation ceremonies featured demonstrations of impossible maneuvers and unconventional strategies that would have horrified traditional military commanders. The transformation of galactic society was accelerating with each passing day. Species that had not spoken to each other for centuries began collaborating on projects that required combining their unique capabilities. The rigid caste systems that had dominated Confederation politics for millennia gave way to merit-based organizations where good ideas mattered more than ancient bloodlines or traditional authority. Admiral Susan Carter oversaw the integration of human tactical doctrine into alien military forces, a process that required completely rethinking how space warfare could be conducted. Her training programs taught alien officers to embrace uncertainty, to make decisions based on incomplete information, and to value initiative over obedience to established protocols. Colonel Mike Davis established rapid response teams that could be deployed anywhere in Confederation space within hours rather than the months it had previously taken to organize military operations. These units combined the best elements of different alien technologies with human leadership and tactical flexibility, creating forces that could adapt to any situation. The laughter that had once echoed through Confederation Station Alpha when Haven Alpha humanity first arrived had been replaced by something far more valuable, respect earned through demonstrated capability and proven results. The aliens had learned that advancement was not about reaching perfection and stopping, but about continuing to grow and change and improve without limit. As Ambassador Carol White signed the final documents that established humanity's new role in galactic civilization, she thought about how far they had come from those early days when they were dismissed as primitive pets. The species that had once been assigned to mine asteroids in forgotten corners of space now led the galaxy into a new age of exploration and discovery. The transformation was complete, but it was also just the beginning. Humanity had not just saved the Confederation from the Devourers, they had saved it from itself, from the stagnation that comes with believing you have nothing left to learn. The future stretched ahead of them, full of possibilities that no algorithm could predict and no tradition could limit. The aliens had indeed stopped laughing, but they had learned to do something far more important. They had learned to dream. Again, to imagine futures that were better than their past, and to believe that any problem could be solved with enough creativity and determination. Humanity had given the galaxy its greatest gift, the knowledge that there were no limits to what could be achieved when different minds worked together toward common goals.